If you're someone who already sees the manipulation, the media tactics, the emotional bait, the ideological outrage machines, but you still find yourself reacting, leaking energy, or losing your center, this episode is for you. Because awareness isn't the solution, not by itself. You can understand the system, call out the patterns, and still get hijacked by them. Because clarity doesn't come from insight, it comes from infrastructure. I'm talking about the internal systems, energetic, perceptual, and behavioral, that allow you to stay clear, centered, and sovereign under pressure. This is Amar Strand. Welcome back to my podcast. Today we're talking about the one thing most people who see through the system still don't know how to build, the internal systems that make clarity sustainable, even when you're surrounded by chaos. In the last episode, we talked about why clarity keeps fading, how you need a specific energy threshold to maintain access to your full intelligence and discernment. We covered how you split between two versions of yourself, the clear, sovereign version, operating on full power, and the confused, reactive version, running in energy conservation mode. But here's what I want you to understand about that energy threshold. It's not just personally significant, it's strategically significant, because the system you're living in is specifically designed to keep you below that line. You might think this is about distraction, that they're just trying to keep you busy, scrolling, consuming, but it's more sophisticated than that. They're targeting your capacity for independent discernment. They're dismantling your ability to think clearly, feel accurately, and act from your own center of gravity. Your natural state is clarity, an innate ability to sense what's true, feel what's right, and navigate complexity with discernment. You were born with the capacity for sovereignty, to be the author of your own experience, not a product of other people's agendas. But that natural capacity is exactly what makes you ungovernable, and that's why it has to be disrupted. Every time you lose your center, every time you get swept into reactive emotion, every time you find yourself arguing from a place of manufactured outrage, that's a win for the system. Because a person operating from their center of gravity can't be controlled. They can't be manipulated into hating the right people, buying the right things, or looking the other way while the real damage happens. So the manipulation isn't random. It's targeting the specific mechanisms that would make you immune to manipulation. It targets your nervous system's capacity for regulation, your ability to discern truth from propaganda, your connection to your own values rather than engineered emotion. And here's what makes this particularly insidious. They've convinced you that developing these capacities is selfish, spiritual bypassing, or privileged. That working on yourself while the world burns is somehow irresponsible, but actually developing unshakable inner authority is the most radical thing you can do. It's what they're most afraid of. Because when you operate from genuine clarity, not reactive righteousness, but actual discernment, you can't be herded. You can't be used, and that's exactly why this capacity has to be reclaimed. And here's where things tend to break down. You see the manipulation, you understand how fear-based messaging works, how your emotions get hijacked, how you're turned into a pawn in someone else's game. You see it all, but seeing doesn't stop it. Then the advice shows up. Trust your heart. Find wisdom within, follow your inner knowing, and that sounds beautiful, but without the infrastructure to support it, it doesn't hold. Without the energetic foundation we talked about in the last episode, the threshold that allows sustained clarity, you're still reactive, still easily thrown. You become more sensitive to the chaos around you, more aware of the manipulation, but you still can't hold your center when it matters most. Awareness without infrastructure is like seeing the trap but still walking straight into it again and again. You don't need more diagnosis. You need the capacity to act differently in the moment of activation and the discernment to know what even deserves your attention. Because most of what pulls you in doesn't serve clarity. It feeds your addiction to outrage, stimulation, or moral performance. And unless you can spot that in real time, you'll keep mistaking activation for awareness and noise for necessity. Maybe you've felt like this lately. Something happens in the world, something charged, morally loaded, and before you've even absorbed what's actually happened, you're pulled into the tidal wave of reactions, hot takes, opinion posts, instant moral clarity from every direction. You watch the videos, you scroll through other people's responses, picking up signals about how you're supposed to feel, what you're supposed to think, where you're supposed to stand. And it feels like something's happening. Your mind is engaged, your emotions are lit up, you're mentally sorting what's true, what's alarming, what matters most. But here's the trick. Your system doesn't always distinguish between that and actual action. The flood of cognitive and emotional activity registers as doing something. But what actually happened? You got pulled in, lit up, and drained, and nothing changed, except now you're carrying other people's opinions, their outrage, their ideological certainty, their moral framing. You didn't choose them, you absorbed them while your defenses were down. And unless you clear them out, those signals start running in the background, shaping how you think, what you feel, and what you believe you care about. And that's how noise becomes identity. That's how discernment gets replaced by reaction. So you end up in a bind. Either you stay informed and get pulled into reactivity, or you disconnect entirely to protect your peace. And both of those responses serve the system perfectly. Reactive people can be steered. Overwhelmed people just withdraw. What they don't want is someone who can stay present and clear while being fully aware. Someone who can care deeply without losing discernment. Someone who can respond instead of react. And that takes more than good intentions. It takes infrastructure, the energetic and nervous system capacity to hold clarity under pressure. So what does it actually take to build the kind of infrastructure that lets you stay clear and sovereign while remaining engaged? It's not what you think. It's not about becoming emotionally detached or pretending difficult realities don't exist. It's about developing what I call radical clarity, the capacity to see clearly, feel deeply, and respond powerfully without being hijacked by your own nervous system. And here's why this is radical. Every mechanism in our current system is designed to prevent you from developing this capacity, because a person with unshakable inner authority becomes ungovernable. The infrastructure you need operates on 3 levels. You have to build all 3 in tandem. They're interdependent. If you skip one, the structure just doesn't hold. So first, you need to anchor your authority, your permission, your responsibility within yourself rather than out there. This means your center of gravity, your center of authority is rooted within yourself. This is personal authority. You might be very advanced and self-aware in many ways, but if you're still looking outside yourself for permission to think what you think, feel what you feel, or act on what you know to be true, you don't have personal authority yet. Personal authority means you stop deferring to others to tell you what's real. I mean, you can learn from experts and consider different perspectives, but you no longer need outside validation before trusting your own perception. You develop your own capacity to discern truth, to sense what's right for you, to make decisions based on your own values rather than manufactured consensus. The next piece is energetic mastery, taking full responsibility of how you use your energy, thoughts, emotions, imagination, and your body. This means recognizing that your attention is the gateway to your life force, and your body is its instrument. Attention itself takes energy, but when something hooks you, gets a rise out of you, pulls you in to more thinking, more feeling, imagining, rehearsing, that's when your life force gets captured. You get hoovered up into a loop without even realizing it. Energetic mastery means you can feel the difference between genuine concern about real issues that affect you and the sticky, addictive quality of manufactured drama. You can care about what's happening without absorbing the collective hysteria around it. And most importantly, you become aware that your focus and energy are your two most precious assets. And they're exactly what's being harvested by all this manipulation. When you have mastery, you stop allowing them to be captured to support a system that is not interested in your well-being. This is what allows you to engage with difficult realities from a place of actual sovereignty rather than being farmed for your emotional and energetic resources. The final piece is practical discernment, the ability to know what truly requires your attention and what's just designed to capture it. But this part demands something most people avoid, which is radical self-honesty. Can you recognize the part of you that wants to get pulled in? The pull toward the drama, the momentum toward emotional activation? It's subtle, but it's there. That's the drama addiction we touched on in the last episode, and no one is immune to it. Are you willing to look at yourself honestly and recognize this? Can you admit when you're choosing to stay informed, not because it helps anything, but because the intensity feels like importance? Can you acknowledge when you're engaging, not because it serves your values, but because it gives you a hit of righteousness or belonging? Practical discernment asks, what's actually mine to handle? What can I truly influence? What deserves my energy and what's just bait? But radical self-honesty goes deeper. It asks, am I engaging with this because it truly matters or because I'm hooked on the charge it gives me? Building this infrastructure requires you to do the opposite of what the system trains you to do. Instead of outsourcing your authority, you develop your own capacity for discernment. Instead of letting your energy scatter wherever it's pulled, you become strategic about where you invest it. Instead of consuming information unconsciously or on a manufactured pretext of staying informed or being involved, you become honest about what you're actually seeking when you reach for that next hot take or scroll through that feed. This feels wrong at first. It feels selfish, disconnected, irresponsible even. You've been conditioned to believe that constant vigilance and participation and immediate reaction are signs of being engaged and caring. But developing this infrastructure is actually the most responsible thing you can do right now. You can't contribute to solutions from a reactive state. You can't make wise decisions when your authority is scattered outside yourself. You can't discern truth from propaganda when you're unconsciously seeking stimulation rather than clarity. When you operate from the infrastructure of personal authority, you don't become less engaged with reality. You become more effective in it. You can see clearly what actually needs your attention. You can respond powerfully rather than just react. And you can contribute to real solutions instead of adding to the noise. This system, this machinery of manipulation, it isn't new. It's been operating for millennia. What's new is how sophisticated and targeted it's become due to technology. The techniques have evolved, but the basic dynamic of harvesting human attention and energy to serve power structures has always existed. And this system is counting on you to stay reactive, scattered, and energetically available to be harvested. It needs you consuming information, engaging with manufactured crises, burning through your energy on things that don't actually change anything. And maybe you're thinking, this doesn't apply to you, that you're too aware, too sophisticated, too discerning to fall for these manipulations. And that's exactly what they're counting on too. The belief that you're above it, that your intelligence or spiritual development make you immune, is itself part of the trap. It's hubris. And they know how to exploit hubris just as effectively as they exploit fear or outrage. Behind these systems are the top experts in psychological manipulation, billions of dollars in research, and computational power that can model your behavior better than you understand it yourself. The person who thinks they're too smart to be manipulated often becomes the easiest target of all because they've stopped watching for the ways their intelligence is being used against them. Now, here's something no one warns you about. When you start withdrawing your energy and attention from the system designed to harvest it, the people around you may not be happy about it. In fact, they may become surprisingly aggressive in trying to pull you back in. You might think this would be about big things like stopping your social media consumption, refusing to engage in political arguments, choosing not to watch the news. And yes, you will get pushback on those decisions. But what's really startling is how people react when you withdraw from the smallest things that logically should have nothing to do with them. And the reason is this: when you step out of collective patterns, you unconsciously challenge everyone who's still caught in them. Your choice to opt out becomes a mirror that reflects their own unconscious participation. And rather than face that reflection, they often try to coerce, shame, or tempt you back into the correct orbit. They start defending the very patterns that keep them stuck, even if those patterns don't serve them either. You don't owe anyone an explanation for these choices. You don't have to justify why you're no longer consuming information that agitates you, or why you're choosing to protect your energy rather than scatter it. But prepare yourself. People will have opinions, strong ones, about choices that have nothing to do with them. They'll tell you that you're being irresponsible, that you need to stay informed, that you are privileged to be able to opt out. They'll warn you that you're becoming disconnected, that you won't understand what's happening in the world, or that you're abandoning your civic duty. What they're really saying is, your choice to step out of this system makes me uncomfortable with my own participation in it. The intensity of their reaction often has nothing to do with the actual impact of your choice. It has everything to do with how your sovereignty challenges their unconscious compliance. This is particularly true with media consumption. People who spend hours a day consuming news, social media, and manufactured drama will have very strong opinions about your choice not to. They'll insist that staying constantly informed is essential, even as they admit that all this information makes them anxious, angry, and actually powerless. The same thing happens when you stop engaging in political arguments, when you refuse to get swept up in the latest outrage cycle, when you choose not to absorb the emotional charge around every crisis. People will accuse you of not caring, of being selfish, of checking out of reality. But actually what you're doing is checking into your own life. You're choosing to direct your energy toward what you can actually influence, rather than burning it up in reactive consumption that changes nothing. You might even lose some relationships over this. People who were bonded to you through shared consumption of drama, they may not know how to connect with you when you're no longer available for those exchanges. And that's information too, about what those relationships were actually based on. The people who can support your choice to become more sovereign, more discerning, more protective of your energy, those are your true allies. And you can just stop. You can step out. You don't need anyone's permission, and you don't owe anyone an explanation. Your job isn't to make them comfortable with your sovereignty. Your job is to build it, protect it, and live from it. Let me tell you a story that changed how I think about information consumption forever. Years ago, my husband and I were living on a remote beach with no cell signal, no TV signal. We were completely disconnected from the outside world, and honestly, it felt like paradise. And one day, we drove into town for groceries, and as soon as we came into range of a cell tower, our phones lit up with frantic messages. It was one of our employees telling us we had to get to a TV immediately and turn on the news. We rushed home and tried to get something on our television. We were able to get sound, but only static for visuals. It was September 11th, 2001. And we sat stunned in our living room listening to live coverage of people jumping from burning buildings, people calling loved ones from hijacked airplanes to say goodbye. There was no image at all, not even a grainy picture, just static on the screen, and I doubled over in shock and cried for the people involved, for what was to come. Just absorbing this through sound alone was enough to completely overwhelm my system, and I needed to let that grief move cleanly through me. But here's what I did after that initial shock. Nothing. I didn't pursue the story moment by moment, take by take. I didn't seek out more information, more analysis, more coverage. And I never saw the visuals, the footage. It was 10 years later when I inadvertently saw the video and photo footage for the first time. People jumping from burning buildings, buildings collapsing, all the carnage. It was 10 years later, and I was deeply, deeply traumatized by seeing this. It wasn't new information. By that time, 10 years later, I knew what had happened. But having to ingest it in this more potent format was almost like taking in a poison. And this was my realization. It added nothing to my understanding, nothing at all. And yet, it was now inked into my imagination in a way that pure information never was. All I could think at the time was how ghastly it must have been for everyone else to have seen this on repeat, not only at the time of the tragedy, but repeatedly throughout the years, every anniversary, every documentary, every time the footage was used to make some political point. But here's what I learned. There are lots of things you may need to know about, but all you need are the basics, not the endless repeats, speculations, hot takes, expert analysis, or emotional amplifications. And if your nervous system is clean and not in a state of constant overstimulation, you will naturally want to receive and process difficult information in the most low-resolution way possible, preferably by reading about it, next by hearing about it, and almost never by seeing it. When I saw that imagery for the first time, I felt poisoned, physically and emotionally sickened. But if you see these kinds of things, these images on constant repeat, which is exactly what happens during major world events, or these days, even minor ones, you become overexposed to the point where you have to go numb. You have to take down your sensitivity by buffering your natural, clear emotional signals. This is what constant, immersive, high-resolution visual consumption of tragedy, crisis, and drama does to you. It doesn't make you more informed or more engaged. It makes you less sensitive, less able to feel cleanly, less able to respond appropriately to what's actually happening in your own life. Your nervous system wasn't designed to process the visual trauma of the entire world on a daily basis. When you expose yourself to that level of intensity repeatedly, you don't build resilience, you build numbness. And numbness isn't strength, it's protective shutdown. The question isn't whether you care about what's happening in the world. The question is, how much do you really need to see to understand what you need to understand? How much visual and immersive and repetitive consumption is actually serving your capacity to respond wisely, and how much is just poisoning your system? Most of the time, the answer is you need far less than you think. You don't need another content cycle dissecting what's wrong with the world. You need infrastructure that keeps your clarity intact when the noise starts rising. If you're done being farmed for your attention and energy, then build the system that makes you unavailable. The infrastructure can be built. Personal authority, energetic mastery, and practical discernment. These aren't mystical concepts. They're learnable skills that create real freedom in a world designed to keep you reactive and scattered. When I saw that footage 10 years later, I understood viscerally what I had been protecting. My capacity to feel cleanly, to think clearly, to respond from my own center rather than from manufactured urgency and nervous system overwhelm. That protection, it isn't selfish, it's strategic. You can't contribute to real solutions while your energy is being harvested by systems that profit from confusion. If this resonates, if you recognize the pattern and want to go deeper, my courses on energetic sovereignty and personal authority support you in building this infrastructure. And you can sign up for my newsletter to continue exploring these themes if you're ready to reclaim your energy and attention. The choice is simple. Keep feeding systems designed to exploit you, or start building the capacity that makes you free. Your energy is your currency. Spend it wisely. And thanks for spending this time with me, and we'll talk again soon.